Hi everyone, Muthany Stash Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Swans album, Leaving Meaning. This is the 15th full-length album from experimental noise and post-rock band Swans. Michael Gira and company are back after a short hiatus and a bit of a reformation. Leaving Meaning is said to be from a new iteration of the band, something post the recent amazing trilogy series of albums that they dropped this decade. The Seer, which is uncompromisingly dark and harrowing, the crushing and explosive To Be Kind, and then the amazingly thick and transcendental The Glowing Man. These records not only account, in my opinion, for some of the best material so far in Swans' discography, but also some of the best rock music of this decade. And after such a mind-expanding set of projects, I was interested to hear where Swans would go next. As far as this being a new version of the band, looking at the liner notes, a lot of familiar faces are still in the mix here at some point, even percussionist Thor Harris. All of the placements and involvement levels of each musician isn't 100% clear because the liner notes are a little jumbled, but what is obvious is that this Swans album, much like every recent Swans album, feels like a huge communal undertaking with Michael Gira spearheading the whole thing. We do seem to get some names outside of the usual Swans powwow though. Ambient and electronic music artist Ben Frost performs on the record. Singer and composer Anna von Hauswolf is here too. Even Jeremy Barnes and Heather Trust of A Hawk and a Hacksaw fame, which is a pretty amazing indie crossover that I would have assumed would happen earlier given their love of things like Hammer Dulcimer. Sonically and stylistically though, Leaving Meaning doesn't seem like that much of a departure from what Swans have been doing as of late. The linear song structures, the epic builds, the intensity, the mysticism, the cerebral and hypnotic vibes. That's all here, again with a few variants across the track list. The glossy tones on the track ANNALINE. Guitars and sparse pianos on this track just sparkle beautifully and elegantly. And there also seems to be a bit of gospel influence in Michael Gira's vocal performance here in the chord progression. And we hear the return of Swans dabbling in gothic country on the song It's Coming, It's Real. Prior to the release of this album, I thought it was a great moment, and now that I hear it in the thick of the entire record, I still love it. We also have the haunting and eerie vocal harmonies and creaking instrumentation on the nub, which sounds like something out of a psychological horror movie or a witch's coven. I also think the ritualistic and tribal chants on the track SUNFUCKER are thrilling. Also, this song features one of the most grand instrumental progressions of the entire album, with all these layers of hammered dulcimer and strings, bells, and what sounds like maybe accordion. At one point, the track transitions into this very steady, sinister groove, which for Swans at this point is a pretty tried and true formula. It's just done really well again here. But as much as I enjoy the ideas on this record, I feel are pretty new and refreshing, across the album, they're just too few and far between. I think Leaving Meaning feels more like an album that is a reiteration for Swans more than it's an expansion, with a handful of tracks failing to adequately progress compositionally across their 6 or 10-minute runtimes. I guess I was a little naive going into this record thinking because it's 30 minutes less than a lot of the 2-hour albums Swans has been dropping as of late, then the tracks are going to be more direct. They're going to get to the point, but sometimes the expected climax at the end or even in the middle of a song never really arrives. And what we get as a result of that are just ephemeral ideas and maybe a lack of direction. I mean, even with The Nub, one of the most texturally gratifying songs on the entire record, the band never really puts a stamp on all of this tension they're building up for the duration of the track, and the last few moments are spent just giving us a drone that slowly dissipates into nothing. I do find this album to be kind of a breeze in comparison with a lot of Swans' recent stuff. It's actually kind of easy to get through despite it being 90 minutes. It was also pretty simple making heads or tails of what moments and tracks appealed to me and which ones didn't. And that's partially because I don't really feel like I'm listening to much of a progression or flow across the entire album. I don't think these tracks reinforce each other all that well. I don't feel like I'm wrestling with a large, cohesively arranged beast, as each track here feels pretty isolated and sectioned off. And even though I think Leaving Meaning is a good, is a solid, is a likable project, there are just too many tracks here that, again, I feel like didn't climax in the way I would have liked, or just didn't go far enough. The song The Hanging Man, for example, sounds like the intro or the first leg to maybe a larger, more consequential song earlier in the Swans' discography, but instead it just gets tedious over the course of its runtime because it mostly relies on the same guitar lines again and again and again. What few transitions we get aren't really that great or gratifying or tension releasing. Jira's shouts on the track aren't even really as rousing as I would have liked. I was somewhat underwhelmed too by Cathedrals of Heaven as well as Some New Things. Even though I do love the great groove and Jira's vocals on that track, the tone of this song is impeccably sour and menacing. But the track pretty much hits you with this same singular vibe and sound for all of 7 minutes, and I just feel like it could have done more. My least favorite track on the entire record, though, is most likely the title track. The vocals are way too washed out. Compositionally, it is bland, and the instrumentation for the duration of the track feels like it's constantly stuck in this state of, I don't know, starting or introing or just setting the tone, but it never develops into something all that substantive or gratifying. I'm happy to report, though, that there are more highlights on the second disc than there are on the first. The Nub, It's Coming, It's Real, both of which I talked about and both of which, for the most part, I think are great. The song What's This is a favorite as well. I love the tribal drumming on this cut, the folksy layers of strings too. Jira's lead vocals feeling wearier than usual. It's a very somber song. Enchanting too, and the sparkling crescendo that's offered to us in the second leg of the track is fantastic. It's one of Swans' most mellow and wondrous tracks in a while. And we also have My Phantom Limb, which is a manic and disorienting closer with all of these Jira vocal layers where he's shouting and ranting. Some of the vocals are deadpan too. In a way, it reminds me of very early Swans, like Filth and Cop era Swans, but without the same primal noise rock riffage. Even though instrumentally it sounds very much like a modern Swans track, I feel like that old framework of their stuff is still there. Overall, I think this is a pretty good album from Swans. There was only one track that I really disliked, and most of them I thought were pretty good, and there were a handful that hit me as being just a little middle of the road, kind of predictable, so-so, not pushing the envelope in the way that a lot of Swans' recent work has. And that certainly doesn't mean they're bad, especially since it sounds like they still took quite a bit of skill and forethought to compose and perform. I just can't tell you this record is as grand or as ambitious or as large in scope or as transcendental as Swans' past 3 records. It's far from one of their worst, though, and certainly worth listening to if you've been a fan of everything Swans has been doing up until this point, especially the recent stuff. I'm feeling a light to decent 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video for you to check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Swans, forever.